All right, welcome to the 41st edition of Before the Battle. My name is Nick Baldwin, and joining me, as always, is the man behind BestFightPicks.com and the host of Half the Battle, Daniel Levy. Daniel, how's it going?
It's going amazing, man. I mean, shit. Connor and Nate are finally gonna fight, so it can't be going any other way than amazing. And I'm looking forward to breaking down the fights with you guys.
For sure. Now, joining us, as always, a writer for Sportsnet.ca. Go, Paolo. Paolo, how's it going?
What's up, guys? As always, excited to be breaking down fights with James Lynch, who we're going to get to soon.
Yes, and joining us for the second time, as you said right there, James Lynch, the host of The Parting Shot, video journalist, I'll call you, for Flow Combat, MMA Oddsbreaker, Sportsnet.ca. James, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be with these fine gentlemen talking about a really great card we got coming up here on Saturday, so I'm stoked. Let's get right into it.
Yes, let's do indeed. First up on the UFC Fight Pass prelims, we got Alberto Uda taking on UFC newcomer and in Italian, Marvin Vettori. Daniel, what do you know about the newcomer here, Marvin Vettori, and how do you think he matches up against Alberto Uda?
Vettori's pretty good, and he's gonna have a good future in the UFC. The issue here, he's firstly fighting up a weight class. He should be fighting at 170. He's too small for 85. The other problem is, this ain't Venator. The ref's not wearing an earpiece in the UFC. And but he does have one really good thing going for him. He's beat UFC vets, and he trains at King's MMA. So if he's going to win this fight, he needs to use that patented King's MMA body kick. But I think Uda's going to get him with that tie clinch, whether it's a big knee, whether it's an elbow. I think he's going to knock out Vettori. So I got Uda.
Very interesting. Go, Paolo. Are you going with the Brazilian or the Italian?
I'm going to go with the Brazilian here. I know I was going to say Vettori. I know in Uda's last fight he lost to Jake Collier, but he was piecing up Collier real good until he ate one spinning back kick way too many and kind of got down from there. He was also gassing, but I'm not sure if that was a short notice fight. But I mean, his cardio is an issue, but I don't think that's going to play a role here because I think he's going to finish Vettori pretty quickly, probably take us back and submit him within the first 1.5 rounds.
And James, what about you? Marvin Vettori, the newcomer, or Alberto Uda?
I hate to be really boring to start off this show here, but I agree with Dan and Gopalo here. I do like Uda in this fight, and kind of the thing I look at here is just the experience factor. I know if we look at fights, fight by fight, these guys have a similar record, but as far as I'm concerned, Uda, has a bit more experience as far as, fighting seasoned guys, and I like that in this fight. Vettori, it kind of looks like one of those prospects versus veteran matchups where they want the prospect to win. He's from King's MMA, that's a pretty big gym, but I think Uda's going to take it here. I think he gets a quick finish, and I think he surprises some people, and to be honest, guys, I was surprised to see he was an underdog heading into this one, so I like him at the plus money.
Well, I'll mix things up and go with the newcomer here, Marvin Vettori. And I actually like him quite a bit here. I wasn't impressed with Alberto Uda's debut against Jay Collier. Vettori, yes, he is a bit smaller than Uda. He just actually moved up to middleweight in his last fight at Venator FC3, which was a quick submission over UFC veteran Igor Rancho. So I kind of disagree in the sense that Uda has fought the more seasoned guys. Vettori has fought UFC veteran there, of course, in his last fight. Uda's only has one fight in the UFC. Their records are similar, so I'm not sure the experience will really be a factor in this fight. For Vettori, training at King's MMA, training with some of the best fighters in the world. One of his main training partners is actually Beneil Dariush, who's, of course, one of the best lightweights. Just moved up. He feels good in the new weight class, even though he may be a bit small for 185. I like him here. I like Marvin Vettori to finish Alberto Uda in the first round. Now, next up, we got Colby Covington taking on another UFC newcomer, Max Payne Griffin. Daniel, how do you see this matchup going?
Well, Max Griffin is actually going to have a pretty good future in the UFC, but this is a terrible stylistic matchup for him. First of all, if you go back and you watch when Max Griffin was trying out for TUF, he only had a 4-1 record at the time, and he even had potential back then. Now he has a 12-2 record, and he's really come a long way. His takedown defense is good in the center of the octagon, but where does Colby like to get his takedowns? He likes to get them up against the fence, and that's where Max struggles, and that's where he's going to struggle on Saturday night. The wrestling and the grind is going to be a big factor in this fight, and the big favorite's going to win.
I just want to quickly add one thing about the last fight. Vittori, I forgot to mention, is also 9 years younger than Uda. He's 22 and Uda's 31, so I think that's also something that could play into this fight. Paulo, who do you like, though, in this matchup? Colby Covington welcoming Max Payne Griffin to the octagon.
You know what? I'm gonna go with the underdog here. I was gonna say I want to pick the underdog, but I'm gonna go with Covington for a more conventional pick. But I think Max Griffin is gonna hurt Covington and win a decision here. I don't know if he's gonna knock him out. I know this guy can be a brawler. He can hit hard, but I think Covington's gonna survive. But I think he's gonna do more damage throughout the fight. I mean, there's also a chance Covington just dominates him with his wrestling. And gives him a really rough welcome to the UFC. But I think Max Griffin's going to do well for himself and be the fighter that emerges here. Let's go with a 29-28 decision.
James, what do you think? You're nodding your head, so I guess you're going with Max Griffin over Colby Covington.
No, I'm not. I'm nodding my head at something else, but I definitely don't like Max Griffin in this fight. And you know, Dan talked about him having a bright future in the UFC. I'm not so sure. He's 30 years old. I think it's now or never for Max Griffin. MMA is not a young man's sport. Covington's got the wrestling background, like you guys talked about. He comes from a great camp and American Top Team. He just choked out Jonathan Meunier in his last fight. I think he's kind of back on track. You know, people sort of wrote this guy off after his loss to Worley Alves, but I look at some of his wins before that. You know, Mike Pyle, that's a pretty nice win on your resume. Just in general, I've just been impressed with Covington, and he's only 28 years old as well. So I think you know, he's sort of just finding his groove right now, and he's on a bit of a streak here. And he's a big favorite, but I see it for good reason. I like Colby Covington in this fight. I think he gets the win by decision here.
I'm once again going with the newcomer, agreeing with Paulo here. I like Max Griffin here. I'm not confident because Colby Covington could easily grind him out. I basically see this fight going two ways. Either Colby Covington weathers the storm in the first 5 minutes and is able to take Max Griffin down in the second or third, maybe even choke him out late in the fight. But Max Griffin, unless UFC.com stats are wrong, which they sometimes are, but I'm going to assume they aren't, Max Griffin has a 7-inch reach advantage. Now, that's pretty huge in this fight, I think, and also he's the bigger guy. He's fought at 185 plenty of times in his career. I'm going to go with Max Griffin to knock out Colby Covington. One reason I'm not too confident in that outcome is just Covington is very tough and gritty fighter. His chin is probably pretty good, although it hasn't been tested all too much. Especially in the UFC career and whatnot. So it's not a confident pick, but I am going with Max Griffin, the newcomer, to knock out Colby Covington. And next up, we have the UFC Fight Pass feature prelim, Neil Magny taking on Lorenz the Monsoon Larkin. James, I'll start with you. Who do you like in this welterweight matchup?
I like Neil Magny all day in this fight. Let's talk about the reach advantage. Let's talk about the fact that Neil Magny, one of the most underrated fighters in the welterweight division, his only loss in his last couple of fights is against Damian Maia, who, by the way, might be fighting for a UFC title very soon if he gets past Carlos Condit. I've always liked Magny. He's a guy that I've won a lot of money on because a lot of people don't like him. You know, kind of always look to fade him, you know, in the first round because he always puts himself in trouble. I think this is going to be another fight where he weathers the storm early on and he comes out and he gets a decision victory here. Now, Larkin's no joke as well either, coming off a couple nice wins there. But for me, I just look at the fact that Magny has just grown leaps and bounds since he's been in the UFC. I mean, one of the most remarkable comebacks for a fighter, you know, losing a couple and then turning it right around after this. Comes from a great camp and elevation fight team. So I like Neil Magny here. I think he'll control the pace. I don't think he'll finish Lorenz Larkin, even though he has been finished before, but I do like Neil Magny to get the job done by decision in this fight.
Daniel, do you agree? Are you picking the favorite here, Neil Magny, or do you think Lorenz Larkin can pull off the upset?
Well, firstly, both guys have come a very long way. You know, you recall with Magny, him getting knocked out by Ricci, people saying that he'd never make it in the UFC. Then he goes on a 7-fight win streak, maybe even more. And, you know, he's beating guys like Lim, Gastelum. You know, who was the last guy he beat? Hector Lombard. He's been destroying dudes, and he's just getting better and better. And when people fight him, they don't fight like themselves. Like, that didn't look like Hector Lombard out there. That didn't look like Kelvin Gastelum. And it's not because they were off. It's because Magny's just that damn good. With Larkin, he's got an 8-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. But he's a very fast guy, so maybe he'll be able to close the distance. You know, he was able to knock out Santiago Ponzinibbio, who is no slouch at all. But at the end of the day, I got to go with Magny here.
Paulo, do you agree with both Daniel and James here? Are you picking Neil Magny, or do you think Lorenz Larkin, the Monsoon, can pull off the win?
You know what? I'm not gonna pick against Neil Magny because one thing Neil Magny is, he's a winner. He's one of these guys that he gets beat up, he gets caught in bad positions, he gets dropped by guys who don't really have a lot of power, and then a lot of people are like, oh, it didn't really look impressive in that fight. Let me fade him. And then what does he do? The exact same thing. He gets put into trouble and he comes back and win. So I think what's gonna happen is Larkin is gonna hurt him early, probably maybe even drop him a couple of times, and Magny's gonna be lost in his feet. Then he's gonna engineer one of his great comebacks and probably win the fight, maybe even finish Larkin late. So I'm going to go with Magny here.
Yeah, I kind of agree in the sense that Lorenz Larkin, his only chance in this fight is to knock out Neil Magny early, probably in the first 5 minutes, and yeah, he can do so. He's a very hard puncher, very good and crisp striking, but Neil Magny should be able to keep Larkin at bay. I don't think he will let Lorenz Larkin to get inside Magny's reach, which of course he has an 8-inch reach advantage, so that's huge again in this matchup. I like Neil Magny to pick apart Lorenz Larkin on the feet, possibly take him down also midway or at the later half of the fight. He could pull off a finish in the third round, maybe gets Lorenz Larkin's neck or whatever, or even knocks him out. But if gun to my head, I'll go Neil Magny by decision, but I'm definitely confident in Neil Magny to get the job done on Saturday night. Now, kicking off the Fox Sports 1 televised prelims, we got Randa Quiet Storm Marcos taking on Courtney Cast Iron Casey. Paolo, who do you like in this matchup?
I really like Randa Marcos here, but only if she actually uses her wrestling to win the fight, because I think that's her easiest path to victory here. Courtney Casey, exciting fighter, not really the best fight IQ. Like, you see her like rocking Joanne Calderwood, and she goes and flops on her back for whatever reason. But one thing that bothers me about Marcos is she left TriStar, and I'm not really sure why. Some people are saying she left TriStar because she didn't like how she was sort of being groomed to be a more patient, more technical fighter. And I mean, yeah, that's not good from a fan perspective, but from a like gambling perspective, from a competitive perspective, that's how you're supposed to approach fights. You're supposed to be patient and technical and win a fight like that. So it's going to be a tough fight. I think Marcos is going to win, but I think if you're going to bet Marcos, you might sweat this one a little bit.
Daniel, do you agree? Who are you picking this matchup, Randa Marcos or Courtney Casey?
You know, I actually like the fact that she left TriStar because there's something about sticking with the people that brought you up in this game. You know, loyalty, that's the sign of a world champion. And even though I don't think that she's going to be the one to beat Joanna or anything like that, you know what? She still had a good fight with Carolina, who very well could be the one that defeats Joanna. And with Courtney Casey, yeah, she did defeat Stansu in the first round. The only thing people remember about that fight is, you know, her getting that full mount and elbowing Stansu. They don't remember, you know, the first 2 minutes where Courtney Casey looked really slow and just awkward on the feet. And that's not going to go well against Randa Marcos. So Randa Marcos be a unanimous decision.
James, who are you picking in this women's strawweight matchup?
I'm taking Randa Marcos in this fight, and yeah, just to kind of talk about her leaving TriStar. She basically said it was just she didn't like the way she was kind of they kind of made a game plan for her and everything else, and I think she is more comfortable at Michigan Top Team where she's been for the last year and a half. Before that, she was at MTC in Windsor. It just seems like for her it's a better fit. I mean, not every fighter can go to a bigger gym and thrive. In her case, I think she's better off being at MTT. I think when I look at this fight, I just look at the fact that Randa's improved her striking so much. She's improved her wrestling. She has that in her back pocket if she needs to use it. Now, Casey, fell in love with her submission game early on in her career, but she hasn't used it that much. If you want to look at one area of kryptonite for Randa Marcos, it's that she tends to get submitted sometimes in certain fights, but she hasn't been submitted in a while. And you look at her losses. I mentioned this on the parting shot. I mean, they're against people that are either title challengers or going to be title challengers, as far as opponents go in the UFC. So I like that. I like the fact that Randa has that experience of being on the Ultimate Fighter and everything else. I just like her in this fight. I think she gets it done. No bet for me because I'm with Paolo here. It's a little bit of a sweat regardless. I do think it's a fairly even matchup, but I got to give it to Marcos by decision in this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. This is a close fight. It probably could go either way, but I look at Randa Marcos, and I actually agree that although TriStar is the better gym compared to MTT, if a fighter is more comfortable at a gym, that's where they should be. And Marcos has said that she's more comfortable at MTT compared to TriStar. So yes, she's getting in more training or better training probably at TriStar, but if she feels she's better and better off at MTT, then that's where she should be, in my opinion. Casey's a more powerful puncher, and one thing to note, I've never picked a Courtney Casey fight right, so chances are Casey will knock her out in the first round, but my pick here is Randa Marcos. Like James added, she really only loses to top contenders, title challengers, things along those lines. So she doesn't. There's really no shame losing to guys or girls like Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Rose Namajunas. So I think she's just a better fighter than Courtney Casey. Casey could catch her, but I don't think she will. My pick here is Randa Marcos by decision. Now next up, we got Artem Lobov taking on Chris Avila. James, do you like the Russian Hammer or the UFC newcomer in this matchup?
Well, first off, I hate this fight. It shouldn't even be on here. Artem Lobov should not even be in the UFC. It pays to have good friends, because that's exactly what Artem Lobov is Conor McGregor's friend, and that's why he's on this card. But I digress. Chris Avila is going to win this fight. He's going to kick the night off well for Cesar Gracie fighters, if you know what I mean, and I think he's going to get the job done here over Artem Lobov. I just haven't been impressed with Lobov. This guy's been given a million chances, and he's already lost 2 in the UFC already. I know Avila doesn't have the experience factor that Lobov has, but I think the fact that he's training with Nate Diaz and those guys, I think we're going to see a much more improved fighter. And let's not forget the fact he's 23 years old. Lobov getting up there in age as well too. So give me Chris Avila in this fight. I'll take him by decision.
Daniel, do you agree? Are you going with the newcomer Chris Avila, or do you think Artem Lobov will pick up his first official UFC victory?
Well, it is true that Artem Lobov is still in the UFC because of his buddy. However, he did make it to the finals of the Ultimate Fighter, so you got to give him credit for that. But the 2 guys he lost to, okay, so he loses to Ryan Hall, and Ryan Hall is a world-class jiu-jitsu guy, has his back for all 3 rounds and can't choke him out. So if Ryan Hall can't choke him out, I don't think Avila can choke him out. Then he goes in there with Alex White, who, look, even though Alex White is not a top-level UFC guy, Alex White would absolutely whoop Chris Avila. I'll tell you that right now. Avila just has no experience. He's 5-2, 5-3 or something. You guys should go back and watch his fights, because this is a different ball game. Now Artem, yes, he's what we like to refer to as a jobber. There's no doubt about it. 11-12 record, like, come on. But at least he can crack. And even though Avila has about a 7-inch reach advantage here, I think the first 4 minutes of this fight, Artem's going to be super dangerous. I think he's going to catch Avila and knock him out, get his first UFC victory. But what happens after that, that remains to be seen.
Paolo, do you agree, or who do you agree with? Daniel or James, who do you think gets the job done here?
I'm going to agree with Daniel, and I'm going to go on the whole 4 minutes thing. I don't think he's going to knock him out in 4 minutes, and Avila's sort of going to... And the fight's going to get really ugly, and people are going to start droning and be like, oh, what the heck is going on here? And both guys might try to put on a show, drop their hands, and start wanging and banging out there and get some sloppy fight out there. But I think, Lobov's going to pull it off and go get a split decision here to save his job in the UFC.
My key to success for picking Artem Lobov fights is to not pick him. It's worked thus far in his UFC career, so I'll continue that. My pick here is Chris Avila. Next up, we got Raquel Pennington taking on Elizabeth Phillips. James, I'll start with you. Do you like Rocky here, the number 8 women's bantamweight fighter, or Elizabeth Phillips?
I really like Rocky Pennington in this fight, and I talked a bit about it on my show as well. I just feel as though that she has developed a lot further ahead in her career than Elizabeth Phillips. Phillips has also had a lot of gaps. She hasn't fought a ton in the UFC. I remember she made those comments towards the UFC, and I think they kind of punished her and kept her on the sidelines as a result of that. Now, I do have to give Phillips some credit. Went the distance with Val Letourneau, coming off the win over Duke, finally getting her first UFC win, but we just saw Jessamine Duke lose another fight again. I don't think that's anything we can put as far as a feather in anyone's cap. Pennington went the distance with Holly Holm. I think she's one of the more underrated fighters in this division. Pretty good stand-up. Nothing to write home about. That Betchkohea fight, a little too close for my liking, but I do think Pennington is leaps and bounds ahead of Elizabeth Phillips, so I'm going to take her by decision in this fight.
Paulo, do you agree? Are you going with Raquel Pennington Rocky here, or do you think Elizabeth Phillips can pull off the upset?
You know what? If I say I'm going to pick Elizabeth Phillips, then essentially I'm picking a fighter who almost got finished by Jessamine Duke. And that says enough for me. So I'm going to go with Rocky Pennington here. With that said, though, Rocky Pennington, this girl can get into close fights even if she's much better than the fighter. So I think this fight can get a little bit hairy. So like I said with Randa Marcos, if you're gonna put money on Rocky, you might sweat it out in some spots, but I think she's gonna pull it off.
And Daniel, who do you think gets the win here?
Well, Paulo just said that if he were to pick Elizabeth Phillips, that means he would be picking a fighter that almost got finished by Jessamyn Duke. Well, let me tell you something. Her and Jessamyn Duke fought twice, and the first time Jessamyn did finish her. So you would be picking a fighter that got finished by Jessamyn Duke. But, you know, Valerie Letourneau got finished by Roxanne Modafferi. So, you know, MMA math doesn't mean shit. Now, here's the thing. You look on paper, you see Elizabeth is 1-2 in the UFC. You know, the comments that James was referring to that she made. But you go back and watch that fight with Dudieva where they scored it 30-27 Dudieva, and it was really 30-27 for Liz Phillips. You know, she shouldn't have said those comments, but, I mean, that's why she said it. She got completely robbed. She should be 3-0 in the UFC. Now, what I think is going to happen is first round, Elizabeth is going to win. The third round, Raquel's going to win. Second round is going to be super close, and I think Liz is going to win a controversial split decision.
My pick here is Raquel Pennington. I see this as a fairly easy win for Rocky. I actually agree that she has been underrated. I really have faded Pennington quite often. Picked her against Bethe Correia, which paid off. She didn't look that great against Correia. You could have argued that it should have gone the Brazilian's way, but this is a step down from Bethe Correia, and I know Bethe Correia you can say is overrated, but this is absolutely a step down. Elizabeth Phillips, just to add on to that, hasn't fought for over a year, and that was the win over Jessamyn Duke. Nothing to write home about, as you guys said. Pennington's good on the feet. I think she'll win a decision here, possibly a late stoppage, but I'll go Raquel Pennington by decision. Now, next up, the headliner of the FS1 prelim, we got Cody Nola of Garbrandt taking on Takeya Mizugaki, pivotal bantamweight matchup. Daniel, who do you like?
I don't like either of them. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I hope Mizugaki wins just because, you know, WEC never die, but, you know, Cody's probably going to either knock him out or 30-27 him. But, you know, Cody's time is coming. You know, he's lucky that he had to fight Tanquino Mendez instead of John Lineker that night. But, you know, he'll get this nice win, and after that we'll make talks about fading him.
James, who do you like in this matchup, Cody Garbrandt or Takeya Mizugaki?
Cody Garbrandt. I mean, this is one of those fights. It's just filler for the bantamweight division at this point. Nothing against Mizugaki because he's a gamer. I talked about it on my show as well. You know, he's had fights where he's supposed to lose and he ends up coming through in a couple of them. If you look at the Brian Caraway fight, you look at the Eric Perez fight. Mizugaki's a guy that's a seasoned veteran. He can never be counted out in a fight. But this is Cody Garbrandt's fight to lose. The real question in this fight is if he can finish it or if it goes to a decision. I'm hoping he doesn't take Mizugaki lightly, but I am expecting a pretty good performance here. I'll take Garbrandt inside the distance. We'll say round 2.
Paolo, Cody Garbrandt is a sizable favorite going in for good reason. The question probably is, does Cody Garbrandt win by knockout or by decision?
See, with Garbrandt is other than Almeida, I don't know. Did he finish another guy? I think. Oh yeah, Brimage, but that was like with like 10 seconds.
And Mendez and Augusto Mendez.
Oh, and yeah, Tanquino, and you know, Tanquino, short notice fight. Marcus and his striking's not really the best, and Marcus Brimage, 10 seconds left. That could have been a decision. Mizugaki, his chin is pretty much fading. He was getting rocked by George Roop. I remember betting him there and was sweating the crap out of that bet because I'm like, what are you doing? You're almost losing to a guy who's one of the most shot fighters in the UFC. And I think Mizugaki is just a shot fighter, man. But with that said, if Garbrandt is like looking to Dominic Cruz, looking to his title shot, and he basically just underestimates Mizugaki, he could totally lose here. But with that said, I don't think that's gonna happen. I think he's gonna beat him up pretty good and win by decision pretty dominantly.
Yeah, Cody Garbrandt, the thing with him is he's getting better every day. He's a guy that you can still go back to the decision win over Delano Lopez last year, I believe. And that was just, well, one, that was a bad fight, but two, it was very surprising that Garbrandt, he didn't look good in that fight, but then less than a year later, he knocks out a top contender, then undefeated fighter Thomas Almeida. So it's kind of hard to say where Garbrandt is at, but you gotta go by his most recent fights. I believe this guy's a top contender. I also believe Takeya Mizugaki is on his way out. His chin is getting worse and worse. Dominic Cruz doesn't knock out too many fighters, and he knocked out Takeya Mizugaki. Takeya Mizugaki, he's ranked for a reason. He's tough. He's gritty. He, like James said, he's a gamer. But Cody Garbrandt, I believe, is on a different level right now. He is the guy to watch in the bantamweight division, in my opinion. I like Cody Garbrandt here by first-round knockout. Now, opening up the pay-per-view main card of UFC 202, you got Tim the Dirty Bird Means taking on UFC newcomer Sabah Homasi. James, do you like the newcomer who just fought at Titan FC 40 earlier this month, or do you like the Dirty Bird?
Even with the layoff, even with him not fighting since December, I still like the Dirty Bird in this fight. You know, guys, we forget about Tim Means in this division and what he's done. You know, we look at the Matt Brown fight, a quick loss, you know, obviously a performance he would have liked back, but ever since he's moved up to welterweight in 2013, Tim Means has looked great. He's got a lot of finishes. I really like Tim Means, and I really like him in this fight. I know Homasi's been a lot more active, but I just think that Means is a guy that's really kind of cemented himself in that division, and I think he's ready for a breakout performance, and I think it's going to come here. I mean, he's coming off the win over John Howard. John Howard's not an easy guy to knock out, and Tim Means went out there and took care of business in the second round. So give me Tim Means in this fight. Wherever it goes, I feel like Tim Means has the advantage, and I like him in this fight. Probably by stoppage. We'll go third round, a little bit later.
Daniel, do you agree? Are you going with the sizable favorite here, Tim Means, or the newcomer, Sabah Homasi?
Well, you know the Atlanta Falcons are called the Dirty Birds, right? So, you know I got to go with Tim Means here. And, you know, people want to discredit him because of that Matt Brown loss. There's no shame in losing to Matt Brown. And you know what there is even more less shame in? The way he fought Matt Brown. He went out there and tried to go toe-to-toe with Matt Brown, which not a lot of people do. So dude's got a lot of balls, and his hand fighting is really good. He's about a, minus 450 favorite? He should be a minus 1050 favorite in this spot. I think he's going to absolutely whoop Sabah Homasi. I mean, Homasi just fought Patino in a fight which he struggled. You know, with Patino, I'm like, dude, you know, this is the biggest step up in competition I've ever seen in my life, and yeah, Homasi's gonna hit the deck.
Go, Paolo. Do you like Tim Means here? If so, how?
Yeah, I think Tim Means is gonna come back with a vengeance and remind everyone that he's a player in the division. The only thing about Homasi is this guy he has that look of a fighter. I mean, I guess he's good enough to be in the UFC, but that doesn't really say a lot with all the guys that have been coming into the UFC, and we're thinking, what the heck is this guy doing in the UFC? But yeah, you know, tough break for him is coming up here. I mean, he's getting his opportunity to fight in the UFC, but it's against Tim Means, and I think he's gonna eat some elbows, and then he's gonna get knocked out.
Yeah, I agree. Tim Means is definitely going to win this fight. The only thing about Tim Means that I want to bring up that could go against him is the whole USADA debacle. Now, I know it was a Tatum supplement. He didn't pop for, like, anabolic steroids or anything like that, but mentally he could be affected, good or bad. This could be motivating for him. He could come back, say, I want to clear this up. I want to get this out of the way. Or it could still be on his mind, and that's all he's thinking about. He's not really focused on the fight at the task at hand. So it could go either way on that, but you can't really base a fight on that, especially when it comes down to a big favorite like Tim Means is. Tim Means is just on a different level than Sabah Homasi. I watched Homasi's last fight against Jorge Patino, who's over 40 years old, and I agree with Daniel. He didn't look that good. He got the knockout in the second, but he didn't look fantastic. And I agree with Daniel, what he said on, I believe, the parting shot, that he probably should have put away Jorge Patino way quicker than he did. I wasn't that impressed with Homasi in his last fight. And it's also hard to say how coming in on 15 or so days, 20 days or whatever after his last fight, how that will affect him. Could be good, could be bad. So I'm going to go with Tim Means. It's definitely the safe pick. I like Tim Means to knock him out in the first round. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Hun Gulim and UFC newcomer Mike Perry. Daniel, what do you know about the newcomer here, Platinum, and how do you think he matches up against the Korean?
Well, Perry, all his wins are via knockout. I don't think he's ever been past the first or second round, and he's too small for the weight class. So Hyung Yu Lim's going to welcome him to the UFC, and you know Hyung Yu's had a year off, but in that year off, I mean, if you go on his Twitter and look at the kind of work this guy's been putting in, I mean, his strength and conditioning program is on a new level, and I think that's going to be very evident Saturday night when he knocks him out either with a flying knee or a straight right, maybe a hook, maybe a spinning elbow, whatever it takes. But Hyung Yu Lim's going to get his arm raised.
And Paolo, do you agree? Are you going with the ace here, or do you think the newcomer and the underdog can get the job done?
Well, one thing Mike Perry does have is knockout power, so he has, as they say, a puncher's chance. And the thing about Hyun-Gyu Lim is this guy's an action fighter, sometimes at the expense of defense. Like, he can get a little bit sloppy out there, throwing flying knees and looping punches, and I don't know, maybe he's going to try a spinning back fist. I mean, if he gets too liberal with that, he could totally eat something and get knocked out. With that said, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to run through Mike Perry and finish him quickly. And the thing about Hyun-Gyu Lim is I think he's going to be the division's next Eric Silva, man. This guy's going to start finishing all the fighters he's supposed to beat, and he start going to losing to all the ranked fighters. But, I mean, I guess it's still a bit early to say, but I just have a feeling with a fighter like him.
And James, do you agree? Are you going with Hyun-Gyu Lim here, or do you think Mike Perry can pull off the upset?
Yeah, I like Hyun-Gyu Lim in this fight. You just talk about the fact that this is a guy that is coming off the first loss, knockout loss, I should say, of his career. He hasn't fought since May 2015, so that is a little bit concerning, a little bit in this fight. Perry's been a little bit more active in this one, but you just look at, again, I always bring this up in these breakdowns, but experience does pay off. I mean, Hyun-Gyu Lim been in there with some of the top guys like Neil Magny, like Tarek Safady. Mike Perry just doesn't have that experience. And what are you going to learn when you haven't even gone to a decision in your career? I just think if this fight goes anywhere, I think Lim is better prepared. Like Dan said, he's been putting the time in. I like Hyun-Gyu Lim in this fight, but no bet for me because, again, layoff kind of scares me off a little bit from this one.
Yeah, Hyun-Gyu Lim is going to win this fight. The only concern I have with his game is, like you guys mentioned, the layoff. He hasn't fought in over a year, so he could come back and suffer from ring rust. Not every fighter does. Dominic Cruz proved that a couple years ago, but he could. It's hard to say. Mike Perry, though, probably just not on the same level. Hyun-Gyu Lim has fought some of the best fighters coming off the loss to Neil Magny, and he actually looked good against Neil Magny early on in that fight. Mike Perry, I don't know a whole lot about him, but I'm going to go Hyun-Gyu Lim here probably by inside the distance. Next up, we got a very intriguing welterweight matchup between Rick, the Horror Story, and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. James, who do you like in this welterweight matchup?
Give me Cowboy all day, every day in this fight. I really like him in this matchup, and I should mention, too, Cowboy was the one who wanted this fight. As soon as he finished Patrick Cote at UFC Ottawa, he got on the phone with the UFC, and he said, I want Rick's story. So he knows what's at stake here. I mean, he's the one who wanted this matchup. A couple things. I mean, we've got Donald Cerrone. He's coming up probably one of his best performances to date. In finishing Patrick Cote, I mean, guys, Patrick Cote is a very durable guy. Not a lot of guys have been able to actually finish him or knock him out. I believe it's Cote's actual first knockout loss in the UFC. So Cerrone went out there and just made Cote look like an amateur in that fight. And I put a lot of stock in that. Not that Cote is a world beater by any means, but Cerrone went out there and, like I said, just showed that he is just not just here to stick around. He's there to stay for the long haul. So I do like Cerrone. Again, the thing that we have to look at in this matchup is the wrestling. If Rick Story is able to kind of neutralize Cerrone's stand-up, get him in the clinch, kind of like what he did against Mike Pyle, then it's possible that he could give Cowboy some trouble. But I don't see it happening. I think Cowboy's striking is at the right point right now. Brandon Gibson's got him trained quite well to go in there and just really brawl it out with Rick Story. And I think he's going to dominate this fight. I see a dominant decision here by Cowboy Cerrone, and I think he's going to get it done and just bust up Rick Story. And the last thing I'll mention is Rick Story has not been very active in his fights. He has the fight against Tarek Safady, which he just was coming off of. But before that, he had injuries, he had other things. He's going against one of the most active guys in the UFC, and Donald Cerrone, who fought, like 6 times last year and a couple times this year already. So give me Donald Cerrone. To me, this just makes too much sense for him not to win this fight.
And Daniel, do you agree? Are you going with the Cowboy here, or do you think Rick Story can pull off the upset?
Nick, I got a question for you.
Shoot.
Is Rick Story a top 5 guy?
No.
All right, I got the Cowboy here. Next.
Go, Paolo. Who do you like in this matchup, Rick Story or the Cowboy?
I like Cowboy here, man. I mean, pretty much said it all, man. Cowboy's he's getting better. The thing about Cowboy is when he lost to Dos Anjos, people were gonna write him off again and be like, oh, typical Cowboy. He wins all these fights and he loses the big ones. And then he comes in and I remember people were betting against him with Alex Cowboy Oliveira there. I think I even picked Oliveira in DraftKings. I was one of those guys, and then he starches him really quickly. And then the other guy, next guy, Patrick Cote, who was like on a roll, and I mean he was beating like the Joe Riggs and the Ben Saunders. I mean, who are nothing compared to Cowboy. I mean, but he goes in there and beats him up, man. I mean, he finished him, but in the way he did it, like Patrick Cote was hurt for like the majority of the fight. He was taking a spanking in that fight, and that's not easy to do against Pat Cote. And the thing about Rick Story is, yeah, this guy's also getting better. I mean, he beat up Gunnar Nelson. He's had a career resurgence. But one thing about him is this guy eats a lot of leg kicks. And what is something Cowboy really loves to do? Leg kicks. But I'm not gonna count out Rick Story. I mean, he's a pressure fighter. He likes to grind his opponents down. And Cowboy tends to struggle about that sometimes. Like he can get a bit hesitant, like he did against Benson Henderson. He wasn't throwing as many kicks as maybe, I guess he was afraid to get grinded out by Benson Henderson like he did. But I think that's going to be much of an issue here. And I think Cowboy might actually finish Rick Story. Might be the first person to knock him out. Let's go with a head kick here.
Very interesting. Yeah, I agree. I've always been a supporter of Donald Cerrone. Not just he's a fan-friendly fighter, but I mean he wins fights, and people always pick against him. Oh, he's going scuba diving the day before the fight or 2 days before the fight. Sure, that might not work for some guys, but it clearly works for Cerrone. So I support that. Go scuba dive even more. Go do whatever on fight day. As far as I'm concerned, Donald Cerrone, he's the bigger guy, even though he's new to the weight class, new to welterweight, and usually fought at lightweight, of course, where he had his most success. And he's been looking really, really good at welterweight. Some people were saying, oh, the Patrick Cote win was the best win of his career, and I can't necessarily disagree with that. He's looking really good at welterweight. Rick Story, not active. Look decent against Tarek Safdie. Maybe that's a stretch. He did what he had to do. He grinded out Tarek Safdie and put him up against the fence. It was kind of a classic Rick Story fight. Perhaps I didn't watch it that closely. Donald Cerrone, though, bigger guy, taller, bigger reach. This is definitely his fight to lose. I like him, I'll say by submission. I'll go a mid-fight submission. Rick Story is very durable. I don't see him getting knocked out, but anyone can get choked out, and I think that's what's going to happen. So the horror, I'm going with Donald Cowboy Cerrone by second round submission. Now next up, we got the co-main event of the evening, and this is one I've been waiting for quite some time. We have number 1 light heavyweight Anthony Rumble Johnson taking on number 2 Glover Teixeira with a potential title shot at DC on the line. Daniel, who do you like here?
Shit, I'm wearing my Guns N' Roses shirt, not my Rumble Young Man Rumble shirt, because Rumble's about to take care of business here, man. Look, I like Glover a lot. Really cool guy, great fighter. I think on his visa, how old does it say he is? Like 34, 35? I think he's more like 44, 45. You know what I'm saying? But the dude's a total badass. I got a lot of respect for him, but there's a serious speed difference here. Hey, look, if he can take Rumble's best shots and somehow survive, somehow get a takedown and choke him out, God bless him, but I don't see that happening. I think he's going to get knocked out by Rumble.
James, are you going with Rumble here or Glover Teixeira?
I'm going to keep this quick and simple. Anthony Johnson, first-round knockout. Going to be the second person to knock out Glover Teixeira, because people forget Teixeira lost his very, very, very first fight in the WEC back in 2002 by knockout. Johnson's going to be the second one to do it. But I agree with what Dan said. If Glover is somehow able to survive, I think about 95% of the people in that division don't survive a first round against Anthony Johnson. That 5% are guys like Daniel Cormier. But if Glover does survive, then yeah, he's got a shot, and he's got the ground game, to back it up too. Because Rumble, I still am not convinced his ground game's up to snuff. But more likely than not, Johnson gets a first-round finish. I'm sticking with that.
Paolo, do you agree? Are you going with Anthony Rumble Johnson to knock out Glover Teixeira, or do you think Glover Teixeira can win this fight?
Yeah, you know what? I actually considered betting Glover Teixeira by submission at some point, because I'm like, well, all he has to do is kind of survive, and once Rumble starts gassing, he can, take us back and just submit him, because we know that once Rumble gasses, he pretty much just gives up his back and says, okay, I quit, I'm done, that's it, just choke me out, and then he taps before it's even fully locked in. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, one does not simply survive Rumble Johnson in there. I think what Rumble's going to do is going to walk him down, hit him a couple of times, and he's going to get knocked out. I mean, I used the Ryan Bader example. Ryan Bader, the guy hits hard, but he doesn't hit as hard as Rumble Johnson. And Ryan Bader was piecing up Glover until he landed a Hail Mary punch that put away Ryan Bader. And I know he's been beating the OSPs and the Patrick Cummins, but Rumble is like a significant step above those guys. So Rumble Johnson by knockout.
Yeah, this is a close fight, and initially I was thinking, give me Anthony Johnson all day, but then I'm starting to flip back and forth. Klobuchar, yes, well, one way he can win this fight is weathering the storm. Daniel Cormier did it, and yes, DC's a better wrestler than Glover, but Glover still is decent on the mat. He can weather the storm against Rumble Johnson. It's very, very possible. Will he do so is another story. Anthony Rumble Johnson is so explosive, the hardest hitter by far in the 205-pound division, as far as I'm concerned. Give me Anthony Rumble Johnson here by first-round knockout, just like you guys. But if I was to bet this fight, I would actually go something like Rumble in the first round. I would hedge this. I would go something like Rumble in the first round and then the over. Because I think if Glover is going to win this fight, it's either going to be by decision, a 29-28 decision, winning the second and the third, or by late submission. So if you're a betting man, I would do that. But as far as a pick goes, I can't pick both, so I'm going with Anthony Rumble Johnson by first-round knockout. Because Glover Teixeira, he has only been knocked out once, like James added early on in his career, but I'm not so sure his chin is that good. Like Paolo added, he got cracked by Ryan Bader and then landed that shot that put Bader out. So we saw kind of Teixeira's chin may not be as good as some people think. Anthony Rumble Johnson, I don't think there's really any issues with his chin. Both are great strikers, both get knockouts, but I think it's going to be Anthony Johnson in this fight. Now, lastly, the main event of the evening, the rematch, the featherweight champion Conor McGregor taking a long-time lightweight contender at welterweight in a non-title fight, Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. James, who are you picking?
I'm picking Nate Diaz in this fight, and I just kind of look at the fact of their first fight and what was kind of shown in that matchup, and that is that Nate Diaz miles and miles ahead on the ground when it comes to the ground game, and Nate Diaz is durable as hell. Look, is Conor McGregor going to go out there and knock out Nate Diaz? Highly doubt it. One guy in the UFC has been able to finish Nate Diaz by strikes, and that was Josh Thompson. That's a rarity. That does not happen, and Diaz has fought guys with really, really, really good power. Now look at Diaz's losses. The majority of them are to guys that are high, superior wrestlers, or guys that have just used a good strategy. Like with Dos Anjos, it was kicks. He also used some wrestling, but also Benson Henderson that fight. Henderson just completely outclassed him with his wrestling. Conor's not going to out-wrestle Nate Diaz. I just don't see that happening. So Conor, in my opinion, has a very small window to get a win in this fight as far as what he can do. He might be able to win a decision. He's definitely not going to submit Diaz. I just don't see him knocking him out. So for me, this is 5 rounds. I just think this fight favors Nate Diaz, and we also have to add in the fact that Diaz, is a bit of a bigger guy, more comfortable in the weight class as far as lightweight goes. I mean, this is a welterweight fight, but I got to go with Nate Diaz here. Now, look, if there's anyone who could surprise me and have the best game plan possible and be mentally strong going into the fight, it's Conor McGregor. So there's always that intangible. But if I'm looking at this on paper, I got to go with Nate Diaz, so I'm sticking with that.
Paolo, do you agree? Are you going with the surprisingly underdog here, Nate Diaz, despite beating Conor McGregor this past March? Or are you going with the notorious, the featherweight champion of the world, Conor McGregor?
You know what? I feel like there's a lot of intangibles in this fight. There were a lot of intangibles in the first fight that a lot of us clearly did not see by picking Conor McGregor pretty quickly there. For one, I really don't know how Conor's going to look now coming into this. We all know Conor, when he's winning, when he's on top of the world, he's trash talking everyone down. He has his witty trash talk lines, and he's just knocking everyone out. He has complete belief in his power. But now we're gonna see a Conor McGregor who's sort of been humbled. He's been embarrassed. He's gone into hiding. He doesn't even want to do media tours with it. He's basically pretty much become a ghost, other than taking shots at WWE wrestlers and stuff like that. So I don't know how he's going to look out there. The reason why I bet him and why I picked him to win against Nate Diaz the first time is because of the Josh Thompson fight. Josh Thompson and Conor McGregor are about the same size. McGregor has the same reach. I mean, a longer reach. And Josh Thompson showed a blueprint of how to beat Nate Diaz. You sort of got to move around him. You're not going to engage him in a straight fight. Just make his stick and move. Kick his legs a little bit, hit him in the body a couple of times. Just, tear him down piece by piece, and eventually, the head kick was there, and he took it, and Nate Diaz went down. I mean, he didn't get knocked out. It's just like he wasn't answering the strikes by Thompson. That's why the ref's like, okay, enough of this shit. No, actually, his corner threw in the towel. So I think Conor could do something like that and beat Nate Diaz. But the question is he gonna do that? I don't know, man. I think this fight might be more or less like the first fight, but it might be longer. So let's go with Nate Diaz by submission in the 4th or 5th round.
All right, well, Daniel, we all know you are a massive Conor McGregor fan, but you also like to make money. So who are you picking, Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz?
You know, it's funny. Anytime I'm breaking down a McGregor fight, it's always, Daniel, you're a huge McGregor fan. But, you know, I've been a big Diaz fan even before I knew who McGregor was. You know what I mean? I mean, both the Diaz brothers, they're icons of the sport. And let me say something else here. You know, before McGregor was even around, everyone hated the Diaz brothers, and I wasn't one of those people. I've been a big fan of the Diaz brothers from the start, so I'm not one of these bandwagon fans that likes him now just because he beat McGregor. But let's backtrack a little bit. So you remember this event, UFC 199? Going into it, so Luke Rockhold's about to fight Michael Bisping. They already fought once, and the first time they fought, Rockhold beat the fuck out of him, and he choked him out in the second round. So now they're going to fight again, right, for the second time, man. Well, I mean, how's Bisping going to win? He's not going to out-wrestle him. He's not going to out-strike him. He's not going to outsize him. He's not going to submit him. Is he going to submit Rock? You know what I mean? Like, Bisping has no way of winning the fight, right? Well, fights aren't contested on paper. He goes out there and knocks out Rockhold in the first round, defies all the odds. Every fight is different. Now, obviously, the potential for Nate to win by submission is there. He already did it. That's a possible outcome. It could happen. But every fight's different, and I think this Saturday there will be a different outcome. I believe Conor will catch him this time. See, the problem the first time, it wasn't a matter of his gas tank or his jiu-jitsu. It was a matter of he was completely drained. Because, I mean, look, if you look back to the first round, he had a beautiful X-guard sweep when he got taken down. And you go and watch Henner Gracie and Brian Ortega break it down on that Gracie breakdown, they were impressed by Conor's ground game. So it really wasn't the fact that his jiu-jitsu sucks, quote unquote. It was the fact that once the tank goes, I mean, you ain't got shit left. So now that he knows that Nate Diaz is super durable and can't be put down, he has to pace himself and fight him accordingly. If he makes the proper adjustments, I think he'll get it done this time, and we'll see a trilogy down the line. So my official pick, with all due respect to the Diaz brothers, who in my opinion are pioneers of this sport, I got Conor McGregor for the victory.
This is a very close one, and I don't know where to start. Now, on paper, Nate Diaz is the bigger guy. He's 3 inches taller. He has a 2-inch reach advantage. I can't. It's hard to say that Nate Diaz won't pick him apart again. Won't, once he gets Conor hurt, take him down, or McGregor will try and take him down, and Diaz will get him top, full mount, all that. What happened in the first fight? It could very easily happen. On paper, Nate Diaz probably should win this fight because Conor McGregor, I'm just not sure how good he is on the ground. I think we've kind of seen that over time, that he's not the best. He definitely excels on the feet. We all know that by now. It's a very interesting fight. One thing that I think will change, or has changed, and will play into this fight is Conor McGregor. They're both. Conor was training for a lightweight fight. Yes, that's not where he usually fights. He's usually a 145er. Although he was probably planning to move up permanently and whatnot. But I mean, he's training for 170 now. He's not going to be. I think we'll see that he fits the weight class a bit more. I think also not necessarily related to the weight, but I think his cardio will be a bit better. I don't think he'll go in there and just kind of adrenaline. He's gone 3 rounds before. And he's gone 3 rounds with an injury against Max Holloway. So we know his cardio is good enough to go 3 rounds pretty easily. And once he got hurt by Nate Diaz, it just kind of he let it all out. But one thing Conor McGregor did, and I don't think he'll do in the rematch, did in the first fight, I mean, is headhunt. I don't see Conor McGregor throwing bombs and only bombs. I think he'll pick his shots a bit more, but also not necessarily look for the kill in every shot, because most fighters, or the best of the best, don't do that. They set up their shots. Conor McGregor was just throwing bombs and looking for the kill in that first round, and Nate Diaz, his movement, he avoided them. He was able to use his striking defense and not get hit. Nate Diaz, one thing going for him, also fantastic chin, one of the best in the lightweight division, or welterweight, I guess I should say, one of the best in MMA. So it is hard to see Conor McGregor outright knocking him out, but I'm actually going to go with Conor McGregor here. I think he'll be able to make some adjustments in training. And one thing I should add, Nate Diaz, now he does have a full camp, so that's nothing to make me any more confident picking against him either. But I think Conor McGregor will be a bit more smart on the feet this time around. I think he'll pick his shots more, not necessarily headhunt, use more kicks. I hope anyways, as a Conor McGregor picker, that he kicks Nate Diaz's lead leg a bit more than he did in the first fight. I see his cardio being better, as I said. It all comes down to does Nate Diaz's chin give up? Does everyone's chin eventually gives up? But I'm not sure this is necessarily the time. I think it'll just be a barrage of strikes, and Nate Diaz won't be completely hurt, but he won't be defending, and Conor McGregor will be hitting him repeatedly, and that is that. I think he won't be knocked out cold or too hurt, but I think it'll just be too many strikes, a barrage of strikes, and the referee will call it off. So that's my pick, Conor McGregor by mid-fight TKO. Now, guys, let's get on to our DraftKings team, our bets, and things along those lines. Mr. DraftKings, go Paolo. Who are your 5 fighters on your DraftKings team this week?
Well, you see, I'm sort of like making adjustments now, but right now the favorites I got are Donald Cerrone to finish Rick Story. I got Hyun Ju Lim to run through Mike Perry. I got Rumble to knock out Glover Teixeira. And I got Nate Diaz because it's a 5-round fight, so even if he gets finished somewhere later or he doesn't finish Conor, there's still a chance he racks up a lot of points with significant strikes. Now I got $9,000 left, so I'm looking at either Lorenz Larkin, maybe hopefully he can pull off that finish, or I don't know, but yeah, maybe I'll just put in Lorenz Larkin for now. But that's my DraftKings team for now.
Now, James, do you do DraftKings?
I haven't done it in a while. No, I'm more of just stick with my bets and things like that.
Okay, talk about your bets if you don't mind.
Well, one that I did like was it was a parlay with Raquel Pennington and 2 props. It was the fight does not go the distance in McGregor and Diaz, and the fight does not go the distance between Teixeira and Johnson. And I just don't see. I mean, it's possible that Rumble and Teixeira does go to decision, but I think more often than not, Rumble either knocks him out or Glover potentially submits him. And like I said in the main event, I think that either Diaz submits him. I mean, Conor maybe could win a decision. I feel pretty confident that Diaz is going to probably go in there and get another submission win. So that's why I think it's safe there. But hey, if Conor somehow does TKO Diaz, then the bet still cashes, right? So, I talked about it earlier too. I'm very confident that Rocky Pennington's going to get the job done there. So that's why I threw her in there as well. I believe it works out to like plus 166 or something. So that was one of my bets, but certainly, I'll be betting Nate Diaz as well, just because he's plus money right now.
Very interesting. And Daniel, I know you're still looking for the DraftKings partnership. Anything else you want to add about this card before we plug our stuff and say farewell?
I ain't looking for anything, my friend, but if they want to look for me, I'm right here in ATL. And if you want to find my plays, bestfightpicks.com.
There you go. Now, guys, thank you very much for joining me here on Before the Battle once again. Daniel, let us know where you can find your podcast, anything you already plugged your bets, anything else you got going on in the world of MMA. Let the listeners know where they can find you on social media. As always, go ahead.
Yeah, man. Good talking to y'all as always. Follow me on Twitter at bestfightpicks. Go to bestfightpicks.com. My podcast, Half the Battle, is on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you check it out, Half the Battle. You won't regret it.
Quickly, I forgot to add my DraftKings team. I just made it. I got Donald Cowboy Cerrone to submit Rick Story, Cody Garbrandt to knock out Taika Mizugaki, Max Griffin to knock out Kobe Covington, Anthony Johnson to knock out Glover Teixeira, and Marvin Vettori to submit Alberto Uda. Paulo, let us know where we can find you on social media, your writing, anything else got going on in the world of MMA.
Yeah, you can find some of my writing at Sportsnet. I got a couple coming out this week, this big fight week. And yeah, I'm still looking for a home for Cheap Shots and DK. I'm working on that, but I'm going to be tweeting those out. If anybody doesn't know, Cheap Shot is basically my version of betting. It's nothing but plus money, so it's only either props or underdogs, like no minus money at all. And so far, I think I'm not at 50% yet, but I'm definitely on the plus on that one.
All right, now, James, appreciate you coming by for the second time here on the show. You're just about everywhere nowadays. You just got the job with Full Combat. Let everyone know where they can find your writing or your videos, I should say, your podcast, everything else you got going on.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me back on the program. I always enjoy doing the show, and it was even better getting a chat with Dan and Go Paolo, as well as yourself, Nick, so got to give some props there. But your audience can follow me on Twitter. I know they can all read. It's all right there on the banner there, Lynch on Sports on Twitter. Check me out, follow me out. We'll talk about some MMA, all that good stuff. Also, if you want a Parting Shot Podcast t-shirt, you can get them on MMAoddsbreaker.com. I post them every week with the podcast. You can get yourself one, look as cool as everyone else, and they're really comfy. They come in tri-blend as well, too. And as far as my work goes, you can check them out, MMAoddsbreaker.com, Sportsnet.ca, and now FlowCombat.com, which, is just pumping right now. So thanks for the support, guys.
All right, now as for me, as always, you can find me on Twitter at NickUFC. You can find all of my writing over at BloodyElbow.com. I just did a few interviews this evening. I talked to Titan UFC 41 Bantamweight title challenger Andrew Whitney. That fight goes down next month. I talked to new interim flyweight champion of Titan FC, Jose Shorty Torres, and I talked to new UFC welterweight who fights Tim Means this weekend, Saba Homasi. Just a few articles out today, an interview piece with one championship champion Angela Lee, Bellator MMA fighter Henry Corrales, Kamaru Usman, and Josh Emmett. So check those out on BloodyElbow.com. My other podcast, hosted each and every week with Andrew Lawrence, the MMA Circus, also on Bloody Elbow. Episode 72 will be out this week, out on Wednesday. We have those three fighters I mentioned earlier, Homasi, Torres, and Whitney, as well as UFC Vancouver's Jeremy Kennedy. I think that's it. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out before the battle. Thank you guys for coming on. And with that, enjoy the fights.